Hello, everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is January the 25th, 2024. I'm Barry Stagner, very excited about this weekend, so please keep us in prayer. And if you would like to join us online for Proximity 2024 with myself and Amir Sarfati joining us via satellite from the Galilee, and Pastor Michael Lay will be teaching as well for a day as we consider what's going on in the world and how it relates to Bible prophecy. And you can join us online. In person is no longer available. But if you'd like to join us online, you can watch from either YouTube, my YouTube, just type in my name, or the church website, calvarycoc.org. That's calvarycoc.org. And you can stream it live from there or watch from the Pastor Barry Stagner Facebook page. You can watch from Behold Israel's platforms and join us for that day. We want to get the word out, as many online ways to watch it as possible. And there's no charge for streaming, so you can stream it if you like. And I hope you can join us. But please do keep us in prayer. Mike and the portion of the Behold Israel team that will be joining us that day are traveling today, be joining with us for Saturday, setting up tomorrow and all that. So just pray for all the tech stuff, that everything goes smoothly, especially with Amir communicating from Israel, and that all that would work well, and all the other technical things that happen inside the building. So Proximity 2024 this Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and we'll go till probably 3:30, maybe 4 o'clock. We're going to do things a little bit different. I want to be sensitive to Amir's time, as he's 10 hours ahead of us. So he's going to teach first, and then we'll do the Q&A after that. If you'd like to submit a question, you can email the church, and they'll get that. If you signed up online, you can, I think there was some instructions how to send the questions in, but you can go to our website and hit the contact button and send a question in. And if you're going or planning to watch online, and we'll get to as many as possible. But that will be the second session. Then we'll break for lunch. After lunch, Pastor Michael Lay will teach. And then after Mike, I'll round out the day. And really excited about the message the Lord gave me. And some interesting things popped up in the course of my studies that I think you'll find to be of interest as well. And we've got some pretty hefty stories here this week. And it's interesting watching everything that's going on in the world. And I've often have thought about how, the ebb and flow of Bible prophecy, things kind of move forward and then they seem to slow down or stall out. And, there's coming a time where everything is just going to continue to advance, much like the birth pang progression Jesus painted a picture of in Matthew 24:3-8. And I think we're in that mode right now. Things just are moving forward on multiple levels, and really, I think, kind of the point of no return type status, where we've reached a place in time. The church age, I believe, is wrapping up. Israel is aging, 75 years old now, and I believe that it's quite clear that Jesus said the generation that sees the return of the Jews to their national homeland will be the generation during which everything mentioned in the Olivet Discourse will take place. So we're closing in. Israel's taking center stage, as it should, prophetically in world news. And we'll talk about some of the things happening. And I don't know, many of you may have received earlier today the weekly update from Amir, and just the tenseness that he mentioned that is happening in Israel, because they know something that is far bigger than the Gaza situation is looming on the horizon. And that is what seems to be a very likely war with Hezbollah, who's far stronger, far more organized, better financed than Hamas, and all the things that they have at their disposal are quite a bit more advanced than some of the crude rockets that have been fired at Israel. Well over 10,000. I think the number is probably approaching 15,000 by now, fired from Gaza into Israel. But again, much of the things that we see going on, even on the southern border or even in the southern portion of Israel with the Gaza Strip, have been quite surprising to them. The complexity of the tunnel system, the dimensions of it, and just some of the things that they found underground, missile building factories and things of that nature have been a surprise. So who knows what's awaiting on the northern border with a much more powerful, much more numerous, much stronger army with Hezbollah, who has taken over the country of Lebanon. If you look back to the dividing up of the land after the breakup of the Ottoman Empire in the early 20th century, one thing for us to remember is that Lebanon was assigned the responsibility of being the Arab Christian state. It initially was established for that purpose, for people who are of Arab descent and of the Christian faith could gather. And yet, now we know it's anything but that. There's still a strong presence of Christians there in the country, but they are under the hand of Hezbollah and would desperately like to get out from underneath it. So obviously we are to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And the way that that's going to come is when the Prince of Peace comes and returns and brings about a peace that no man can remove. So, well, let's get into our stories. The first comes from the Associated Press, and this is what really got me thinking that we're really locked in and moving forward in the prophetic narrative. The UN chief warns that Israel's rejection of a two-state solution threatens global peace. So you've got Israel, the forefront of the news, globalism incorporated in there. In other words, the whole world sees Jerusalem, and this is basically what's implied, that Jerusalem is a burdensome stone to every nation, as Zechariah 12:3 tells us. The UN chief warned Israel on Tuesday that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's rejection of a two-state solution will indefinitely prolong a conflict that is threatening global peace and emboldening extremists everywhere. In his, it's funny that they have nothing to say to Hamas, who is totally against a two-state solution. All they want is the state of Palestine with them in charge. They have no place on their maps that they circulate within their country for Israel. They don't want a two-state solution. They've turned down every offer over the years for a two-state solution because they see no place in Israel or for Israel in the future. And yet, who's the target? Israel. Remember, that spirit tells us it's spiritual in nature, this hatred for the Jews and the rising anti-Semitism. And watching the world flip just quickly, after October 7th, everybody was just aghast at what had happened in Israel and the heinousness of the actions of Hamas. And Israel starts to respond, and what happens? The world turns on the Jews. It's spiritual in nature, no doubt about it. And Satan is behind every bit of this anti-Israeli sentiment. In his toughest language yet on the Israeli-Hamas war, the article continues, Secretary General Antonio Guterres told a ministerial meeting of the UN Security Council that the right of the Palestinian people to build their own fully independent state must be recognized by all, and a refusal to accept the two-state solution by any party must be firmly rejected. And the alternative of a one-state solution with such a large number of Palestinians inside without any real sense of freedom, rights, and dignity will be inconceivable, he said. Well, obviously, he's never been to Israel because the Arabs that live in Israel have the right to vote. They have a right to own the business. They have every right that any Jewish Israeli has. So he's talking from an absolute place of total ignorance. And again, this is spiritual. Satan is the one who blinds eyes of people. He is the master deceiver, and we live in the age of delusion in these last days. And Guterres also warned that the risk of regional escalation of the conflict are now becoming a reality, pointing to Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan. He urged all parties to step back from the brink and to consider the horrendous cost of a wider war. Netanyahu's rejection of a Palestinian state in any post-war scenario opened a wide rift with Israel's closest ally, the United States, which says the war must lead to negotiations for a two-state solution where Israel and the Palestinians can live side by side in peace. They could live side by side in peace if the Palestinians were willing to, but they're not. Their desire is to see, the destruction of the nation of Israel. And, one of the things I think that is so often overlooked by this ignorant world that we live in is one of the cries of many who say dumb things like, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. Before Israel was in charge and before the nation was born on May 14th, 1948, the British were in control. The Palestinians had never been in control of anything. There's never been a Palestinian state. There's never been a Palestine outside of just the region being named that, and it was included areas like Jordan and beyond. And again, this was divided up by the British back in 1918 and beyond, all the way up 1925. I think the San Remo Resolution was initiated that, was basically moving toward giving the Jews their own national homeland, the very land that they once occupied and had Jerusalem as their capital for thousands of years. And their presence there is clear. Archaeology supports it. History supports it. Everybody acknowledges that, who really cares about facts and historical accuracy recognizes that the only people group that has a right to this as far as previous habitation is the Jews. There never was in history a Palestinian state. So, Guterres, again, he's pushing an agenda that is inspired by Satan, and its ultimate end is going to be the whole world standing against Israel. And the Secretary General repeated his longstanding call for a humanitarian ceasefire, an appeal supported by almost all nations. But Israel's UN Ambassador Gilad Erdan, again, rejected a ceasefire, saying Hamas, which carried out a brutal attack on southern Israel on October 7th, is committed to attacking again and destroying Israel. And to halt fighting will only allow the militants to regroup and rearm. History says that statement is accurate and absolutely would come to pass. Now, in Times of Israel says that the top EU diplomat says Israel has no right to block creation of a Palestinian state. And again, history says otherwise. There's no right to return for the Palestinians. They never had a state there in the first place. And again, if you want to walk backwards, you can go to the Ottoman Empire and then a series of Muslim sultans that ruled the region before that, and keep going backwards and backwards and backwards, and you'll find, the empires, the four empires that the Bible talks about, that destroyed the nation of Jerusalem or the city of Jerusalem. And like the Babylonians carried the Israelis off captive, the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman empires. These are the ones that had control over the region. And in 136 AD, because of his hatred for the Jews and the constant rebellions that he was always having to quench, the Emperor Hadrian renamed the area, the geographic area known as Israel, after the enemies of Israel, the ancient enemies of Israel, the Philistines. And because he was obviously a Latin speaker, Philistine in Latin is Palestina. He's the one in the second century AD that renamed the area Palestine because of his hatred for the Jews. But before that, it was the land of Israel with Jerusalem as its capital. There is no right to return for the Palestinian people. They could live, as do the other 2 million Arabs in Israel, with complete freedom. They can be members of the Knesset. They get to vote. They can own businesses. They have every single right that a Jewish Israeli has, those who live inside the boundaries of Israel. And yet, it's the Palestinians that keep shooting rockets at Israel. And then this heinous attack on October 7th pushed Israel, I think, over the edge, where it's just, we're done with this, and this group has to be eliminated. And, again, so now this spreads out as EU Foreign Affairs Chief Joseph Borrell said on Tuesday that Israel cannot be allowed to unilaterally block the creation of a Palestinian state after the war in Gaza. One thing is clear: Israel cannot have the veto right to the self-determination of the Palestinian people, Borrell told a Brussels press conference with his Egyptian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. The UN recognizes and has recognized many times the self-determination right of the Palestinian people, and nobody can veto it, he added. The comments came after Borrell on Monday chaired talks between the EU's 27 foreign ministers and the top diplomats from Israel, the Palestinian Authority, and key Arab states. So they're talking about establishing a state for the Palestinians, recognizing there isn't one currently, and yet the Palestinian Authority has a seat at the table. It just doesn't make any sense and reminds us again that there is a spiritual war that is waging. And let me just remind all of us that this has been going on all the way back since Satan was told in Genesis 3:15 that there was going to come a male child supernaturally conceived from the woman representing Israel who would crush his head. Now, who was that? Obviously, that was the King of the Jews, the Holy One of Israel, the head of the church, Jesus Christ the righteous, who did just that when Satan thought he had him on the cross and was trying to kill him as a baby under Herod, just like he tried to kill, the one who would be born that would crush his head under Pharaoh. When Pharaoh had all the male children killed, just like Herod would later do centuries down the line. And he was unsuccessful there. Early in the morning on the first day of the week, after Jesus' crucifixion, he was raised from the dead and ascended into heaven in front of many witnesses. And, again, or in front of witnesses, I should say, having been eyewitnessed as alive after his execution by as many as 500 people at one time. Well, Satan realized, I wasn't able to kill him as a child. I wasn't able to kill him through the cross. So the only way for me to minimize and degrade the word of God, and therefore, which is what he's always been doing since the garden with Eve and the deception he sowed there, he's been after the Jews. He wants to annihilate the Jews because if he can kill every Jew, then the word of God is not true. And they will not look on the one whom they pierced and mourn for him as one mourns for an only son. Jerusalem will not be the capital of the millennial kingdom, and the Jews who saw Jesus when he returned and believed on him for their salvation won't be ruling with him, for he will have wiped them all out and negated some of the beautiful prophecies of Scripture concerning Israel in these last days. So again, we have to keep in mind we are at a breaking point, really, in this spiritual battle. And we've reached, I believe, as I said a moment ago, we've reached a point of no return. Things are continuing to progress. And that final stage of the labor process, so to speak, and this is a bit of what I'll be talking about on Saturday. So I really encourage you to tune in. We're going to have a great day. Really looking forward to what God's going to do at Proximity 2024. Now, the Jewish News Syndicate reports that Hamas is weakening, but the campaign against it will be lengthy. And former IDF officers laid out reasons why, despite the achievements made so far, Israel's war against Hamas is likely to last for months. And while the IDF is gaining ground against Hamas day by day, destroying it as a military force will take time, according to the former IDF officers. Professor Gabby Saboni, a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, who holds the rank of colonel, retired, told the Jewish News Syndicate that the Israeli campaign will be very long. In Gaza, Hamas has built up the most fortified terror base in the world, he said, both above and below ground, with so many homes in Gaza containing weapons and being linked to underground terror infrastructure. Significant numbers of civilians are involved in all sorts of ways and methods in Hamas's war machine, he said. Now the IDF is fighting this thing, and it's a tough war against a very determined enemy. Hamas are not ready to give up, said Saboni. And the Israeli War Cabinet's declared goal of dismantling Hamas's military and governance capabilities is realistic and correct, he added. It's the only way to preserve our existence. We must destroy Hamas. And this is what this is all about. It's about their existence. And we have to remember that the Palestinian children are raised up to hate the Jews and want to kill the Jews. And they see their own death as a guarantee of entering into paradise. And they're all taught martyrdom. And, there's lots of Muslim scholars who will say that's just not true. And, yet this is shoved down these throats of elementary school-aged children, and I'm sure some of you have seen some video clips of where a little kid who ought to be out, playing. Well, I don't know. I don't think they play cowboys like a cowboy in Gaza, but whatever it is that they would see as something to look up to, they're not doing that. They're sitting there talking about hoping that someday they get to kill a Jew. These are little kids. These are kindergarten and first grade age kids that are saying this. So they're being indoctrinated, and so the number again, it's not a static number. It's something that's going to constantly change as kids grow up and see their purpose in life, and the reason for their existence is killing Jews and wiping out Israel. So this is a big battle, and I think the strategy, as we've watched and seen all the negative things said about it. And one thing I think we all have to remember: nobody wants war. Netanyahu doesn't want war. Nobody in Israel wants war. They want to live in peace, and they didn't start this. And it made me think of my dad used to tell me, never start a fight, but always finish it. And don't run, stand your ground and those kind of things, but never be one who's the instigator. And that's some old school counsel. I'm sure many of you who are of the previous generation parentage heard that same kind of counsel. And that's what Israel's doing. They're saying, you know what, we can't live like this anymore. This constant rocket firing, even things like the very primitive incendiary boons that were launched, burning up forest and crops and all these things of just constant harassment, death threats, rockets fired at civilian areas. And just, it's funny that the UN doesn't have anything to say about the war crimes committed by the Palestinians and Hamas. And that would include putting people in harm's way, putting civilians, intentionally putting them in harm's way and storing weapons and firing weapons from civilian areas. That's a war crime. And yet, what are we hearing from the UN and the International Council and those who try war crimes? We're not hearing anything except about Israel. Now, here's something else I think that's worthy of mention. The Jewish News Syndicate again reports of Hamas openness to new hostage deal is fake news. An Israeli official said that the terror group is actually hardening its posture in negotiations, but that a breakthrough soon is still possible. An Israeli official has dismissed reports that Hamas has softened its stance in negotiations over the release of additional hostages being held by the terrorist group in Gaza. The publications are a fake. The opposite is true. There's a hardening of positions. Hamas is climbing high on the tree, the official told Channel 12 on Wednesday, while stressing that a breakthrough soon is still possible. And citing, Egyptian officials, the Wall Street Journal reported on Tuesday that Hamas was willing to discuss a deal to release civilian women and children hostages in exchange for a significant halt to hostilities. That's basically for a regrouping. There are 108 hostages alive in Gaza out of 253 taken during Hamas, October 7th massacre, according to Israeli estimates. Hamas is also believed to be holding 28 bodies, including 24 from those taken on October 7th. In November, 105 hostages were released as a part of a prisoner exchange deal that included a temporary ceasefire, and 19 women and 2 children remain in Gaza, according to the Wall Street Journal report. Some of the women are soldiers, and 5 of them could be dead. Now, one of the things we have to remember is that within Islam, you are allowed to lie if it furthers the cause of Islam. And, when we're getting all these numbers, it sends the world up in arms over, the numbers being cited. We have to remember that the health ministry in Gaza is run by Hamas. And therefore, anything that comes out of there, it can't be trusted. It's not trustworthy information. It's a lot of it is, I'm sure, pumping up the numbers to make the world turn further against Israel. But again, this is all what the Bible said was going to happen in the end. And this is different. There's no question about it. And then just kind of chatting with Amir recently and texting back and forth. Um, this is just there's a whole different attitude um, about this, and I think everybody sees it as just moving forward. And lots obviously when you see Israel returning to prayer and groups before they go into battle of soldiers gathered in a circle to pray together, and lots of talk about the Messiah, and it's time for him to come, and all of this. All these things are specific to Bible prophecy, and as I said, I think that things are wrapping up. We need to be looking up because our redemption is nigh. The redemption of the Jews, as far as their putting on a glorified body, will come later. But for you and I, it'll happen in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, before the tribulation breaks out on the world. Now, Al Arabiya, the English version, says Yemen's Houthis fire 3 missiles at 2 U.S. flagged ships in the Red Sea. And this is what Guterres was talking about, the Secretary General of the UN, earlier, about the war spreading potentially. And Yemen's Houthis launched missiles at ships in the Red Sea on Wednesday. 2 were intercepted and the third missed, the White House said. U.S. and British forces carried out 2 rounds of joint strikes aimed at reducing the Houthis' ability to target shipping, while Washington has also launched a series of unilateral air raids on missiles that were ready to fire, but the Iran-backed militants have vowed to continue their attacks. There were 3 Houthi missiles fired at 2 merchant vessels in the southern Red Sea, and as it said, 1 missed, and the other 2 were shot down by a U.S. Navy destroyer, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said. It obviously underscores that the Houthis still intend to conduct these attacks, which means we're obviously still going to have to do what we have to do to protect that shipping. I didn't cover the article because it was just a brief mention about the economic impact of shutting down the Suez Canal and the traffic that's been held up. And, big, I think Maersk was the one that the article was about, one of the world's largest shipping companies, that they won't even go through the Red Sea, and the disruption that has taken place and its impact on potential impact on economies around the world. And, you got to remember, during the ride of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, they are going to see, not we won't be here. The world are going to see astronomical food prices where, a quart of wheat and 3 quarts of barley, which is a cheaper grain, are going to cost a whole day's pay, a denarius. And, so the inflation and cost of living will be astronomical. It will take a whole day's pay just to feed one person, 1 quart of barley, a loaf of bread, basically. So, all these things contribute to it. We talked about this with the Ukraine war initially, and Ukraine being a breadbasket for Europe, and all the impact on crops and other things there. All of these pieces come together and are coming together rather rapidly, that potentially could be telling us, the Lord could come for us today and we'd be out of here. And again, you have to think about what's going to happen, after we are gone. And I don't think, there's some who argue that the rapture signals the beginning of the tribulation. But actually, the beginning of the tribulation happens in Revelation 6:2, when the rider on the white horse rides onto the world scene. Now, the Sun UK, this is an interesting article. It says Kim Jong-un and Putin vow to form a new world order. And they offer a chilling warning to the West as tyrants ramp up a united front against the U.S. North Korea said it has agreed to further strategic and tactical cooperation with Russia as both countries ramp up a united front against the United States. The North Korean Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the 2 countries agreed to further strategic and tactical cooperation to defend their core interests and establish a new multipolarized international order. The government body also highlighted Putin's intent for a visit to Pyongyang, saying that it could come at an early date. It followed North Korean Foreign Minister Cho Son-hui's meeting with the Russian president and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow last week. And North Korea has been aggressively tightening ties with Russia, especially after Kim Jong-un's September visit to Russia for a summit with Putin. And one of the few world leaders openly supporting Putin's war on Ukraine, the North Korean tyrant is attempting to break out of diplomatic isolation. He's trying to regain his footing as he navigates a worsening nuclear stalemate with Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo. So, here you've got these two very unlikely sources using a very familiar term that we've been hearing, and that is a new world order. But obviously, Putin and Un see themselves at the helm as those in the World Economic Forum see themselves as Tayyip Erdogan sees himself as the sultan of a new and revived Ottoman Empire, as the Ayatollah Khamenei sees himself as the head of a caliphate with Shia Islam as the authority over the world. We've got all these people vying for position, but I thought it was curious that this new world order phrase is incorporated by these two particular men in these places of power that threaten world peace. Now, a website called Warzone gives us a story. There's other websites that I follow that give us military information also reported on this. And Iran executed its farthest ballistic missile strike ever with a new weapon. Iran used its new Khyber-Shekan medium-range ballistic missile for the first time Monday when it struck what it claimed was a terrorist facility in Syria's Idlib province. The attack was one of 3 Iran carried out in 3 countries over the past 2 days. And Iran also attacked what it claimed was an Israeli Mossad facility in Erbil on Monday and what it claimed were terrorist sites in an unprecedented attack in Pakistan on Tuesday. And while they all seem to have their own objectives, they clearly serve as a timely demonstration of Iran's ability to execute precision ballistic missile strikes close to and far beyond its borders. And the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Aerospace Force launched 4 Khyber Shekan ICBMs from its facility in the southern parts of Iran's Khuzestan province on Monday, said Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, according to the official Iranian Tasnim news agency. And the strike is considered the longest ever by an Iranian ballistic missile. And one of the things that was mentioned in another source that wrote about this same particular situation is they're letting the U.S. know they can reach U.S. targets. And a very clear proverbial shot across the bow to the United States, that they've got a much farther reach than previously known and believed. And this test shows that to be true. So again, this definitely falls under the wars and rumors of wars heading that we know will be increasing in the last days. And here's another interesting story. And, I saw a comment on social media today where it's pretty well known and highly followed, I believe millions of followers on this particular Instagram page, said it's time for the U.S. citizenry around the world, including the U.S., to get involved in straightening things out. Now, what that meant, according to what they said, was, demonstrations and things of that nature. But listen to this. The Gateway Pundit reports that a top UK general says civilians are going to have to be conscripted into a citizens' army to fight a major war against Russia. The warmongering in Europe has gone into overdrive, with military chiefs sounding the alarm to imaginary wars, trying to drum up support for Ukraine and to hypercharge Russophobia, as the patience of its citizens in general with this conflict narrative has greatly diminished. Now the top UK general says they live in a pre-war scenario and insists that only citizen armies will be able to defeat the coming Russian avalanche to disrupt the Western societies. The head of the British Army alerted UK citizens to be prepared for war, fought on the scale of the great conflicts of the 20th century, and that they may need to be mobilized. And speaking at the International Armored Vehicles exhibition in London, General Sir Patrick Sanders said the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a sign of things to come, warning that the lessons of previous wars must be remembered before it is too late. Our predecessors failed to perceive the implications of the so-called July crisis in 1914 and stumbled into the most ghastly of wars, he said. We cannot afford to make that same mistake today. Ukraine really matters. And again, Russia taking center stage as far as the wars and rumors of wars statements that are being made out there. But, the interesting thing is Britain's got its own internal crisis. And basically, you've got a significant cities and portions of the country that are basically saying it's Sharia law or no law whatsoever. And, you've got, if you think about it, it wasn't that long ago before the bobbies, the police in Britain weren't even carrying weapons. They carried a nightstick, basically. And so the citizenry is not like the U.S. citizenry. And I could understand the statement if it were made here in the U.S., because at least at this point in time, there are many, many armed citizens here in the United States. And having the civilian type force employed would go back to basically Revolutionary War times as far as citizen involvement. And the Black Robe Regiment, the pastors that stood up and said, we're not going to sit under this tyranny any longer and all those types of things. So the mentalities here in the country, I should say, as is the weaponry. But who knows what's going to happen in these coming days and how much the church is going to see before the Lord takes us home and switches gears and focuses on the 70th week of Daniel being fulfilled. And we don't know that day or hour, but we do know that the church in Revelation 3:10 is promised to be kept from the hour of trial, not kept through the hour of trial, but to be kept from the hour of trial that's coming upon the whole world. And so we'll be removed before all this stuff goes next level to the final stages of God's judgment on this earth and discipline of Israel. Now, the post-millennial, this flies under the banner of, it's just unbelievable. I'm trying to think of the adage. You can't make this stuff up. That falls under that heading. And it comes from a website called the Post-Millennial. Washington State moves to ban natural gas in an effort to stop climate change. Natural gas is a very clean burning fuel. And again, this is just foolishness. It's efforts to control people. And the bill would ban any gas company that serves more than 500,000 customers from connecting new natural gas lines to new residential or commercial structures. On Tuesday, Democrats in the Washington legislature moved forward on legislation that would effectively ban natural gas from newly built property in the state. Democratic lawmakers revived House Bill 1589, which failed last year and passed a revised version in a 52 to 45 vote. The Democrat-controlled House previously pushed through reducing energy consumption in new construction by 70% with a target of 2031 to help achieve their goal of carbon neutrality for the state by 2050. This is just utter foolishness. You've got this clean burning fuel, natural gas, and it's far cheaper than electricity. And again, electricity they can shut off pretty easily. And now we've got these meters for natural gas as well. They could shut off and control you if your social credit score doesn't meet up to par, and they'll implement those kind of things in the future, I do believe. But it's just incredible that they are actually considering something so ridiculous and contrary to, this the reality and the factual truths regarding natural gas. And, again, we've got these people in places of power who will do exactly whatever it takes to stay in power and control the masses, because that's what the socialists must do. They have to control the narrative and the people and put the people in absolute dependence upon the government. And that's why I've said in time past, socialism is a sin and should not be promoted or endorsed by any Christian, because socialism has no room for God. It puts the government in the role of God, the provider for the people, and causes the people to look solely to the government. for their care and well-being. When God says that he is a provider and that he will watch out for us, he even told us not to worry about the things that people always worry about because he knows we need them. And he will take care of us. And on top of that, Genesis 8:22 says, seed time and harvest, winter and summer, it's all going to continue. And the Lord's in control, and he's in charge of those things. So he will see to it that the hydrologic cycle continues. And, even though we live in a quaking world, we had a 4.4 here in SoCal last night around 9:30. And, all those things are going to continue to happen. And then they will happen in degrees unprecedented during the tribulation period. But, the Lord said, basically, if I can paraphrase what he said in Genesis, this is my planet. I made it. I'll take care of it. And puny little man's not going to be able to ruin it. The Christian Post says, and again, this is a sad commentary on the state of our country, an atheist group forces Georgia courthouse to remove longtime Christian flag. A courthouse in Georgia removed a Christian flag from its property after receiving a complaint from a Wisconsin-based atheist organization. Bryan County courthouse officials decided to take down a Christian flag from their superior courtroom following a complaint leveled by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Local media outlet WJCL Channel 22 recently reported that weeks after receiving the complaint, the flag was removed from the room. Chief Justice of the Bryan County Superior Court, Robert Russell III, decided to take the flag down, the news outlet reported. On July 6th, staff attorney Elizabeth Cavell sent a letter to Bryan County Clerk of Courts Rebecca Crow on behalf of a local resident who took exception to the flag display. And again, this is one of the things that's so bizarre about the age we live in. One person complained, and so they have to satisfy that one person. What about the thousands of Christians? Maybe they want the flag up. And, we're always hearing about, and by the way, we are a democratic republic. We are not a democracy. A democracy is strict majority rule. We have a electoral college and all those things that assures each state's votes count. And so we are not, as we're always hearing, this one particular presidential candidate is a threat to democracy. And, well, if you're so worried about democracy, and democracy by definition means majority rule, then you don't take flags down because one person griped about it. You tell them just to go home and deal with it. Suck it up, buttercup, as that saying goes. Now, the Georgia Star News reports something, and I wanted to include this because I've been, following this. I think many of you have heard things like this also, and that's the rise of trans and homosexuality among young people. And the Georgia Star News reports over 25% of Gen Z now say they're queer. And over 25% of Americans born between 1997 and 2012, that's Gen Z, identify as LGBTQ, significantly higher than previous generations. And that's why I wanted to include the article, because the argument, even though, the DNA studies of the Human Genome Project that lasted for over 10 years showed there is no gay gene, yet they want to continue to argue that it's genetic, it can't be helped, and therefore, you just have to acknowledge it as a normal part of society because they can't change their DNA. And yet, well, there has to be some type of major mutation then for the numbers to go from the greatest generation, the baby boomers, to less than somewhere between 1% and 2% of society being homosexual to now 25%, and just a generation and a half later, well, if it's genetic, something's wrong. Something's going on. Well, it's not. It's indoctrination. It's teaching children that they can, they're not what their birth certificate would say or identify as. And again, one of the things and one of the reasons I wanted to include this is that God had Jesus, as he walked the earth as God in human flesh, had some pretty strong words for those who cause children to stumble. And this is one of the reasons I think you look around the world and it's getting worse and worse and worse and darker and darker and darker. Evil is called good. Good is called evil. And by the way, that is at the end in Isaiah 5:20, where that's quoted. That's at the end of a series of verses about the time when the Lord rises to shake the earth. And then it switches gears in chapter 6, where the famed passage of Isaiah, I saw the Lord seated on the throne. But, back in chapter 2, it talks about what's going to be happening when the Lord rises to shake the earth, and gives some very clear descriptions of the age in which we live. And then it says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put light for darkness and darkness for light. And we're living in that time. And what is the tribulation? It's a time of woes. So very clearly, we are closing in on the last hours of church history, and the tribulation period that will come upon the whole world while we are in heaven with the Lord at the marriage supper of the Lamb, and standing before the judgment seat of Christ, the Bema seat, receiving rewards for the things that we have done out of a pure motive and a pure heart for His glory. Well, that's it for this week. And again, just please keep us in prayer that everything works well. Coordinating Amir being piped in from Israel for proximity. Join us online. I really hope you can and do. And again, go to my YouTube channel. Just type in my name, which many of you are watching on right now, and or the church website, calvarycoc.org, or any of the Behold Israel platforms that do streaming. So we're looking forward to a great day together. And again, our 8th proximity conference, very excited about that and to being together. And, of course, we wish Amir would be here in person. He's joined us for our last few, and it's been just a great blessing. So I pray it will be for you as well, that you be informed and excited and passionate about the lost and perishing around us. As things are wrapping up quickly, Jesus is coming soon. Keep your eyes on the prize and your head lifted up, for our redemption is nigh. So with that said, that's all for today. And I'm sure always enjoy Louis made an appearance last week, and always enjoy seeing the comments and just people from all over the world. And that's why I say he's the most famous dog in the world. People know him whenever we travel. When Amir and I travel, I have people tell me in the Philippines and in Australia and in New Zealand, I love Louis, and all over the country in Canada. So I got a kick out of some of your comments. Well, anyway, that's it for this week. So you know the drill. We'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless you.